Greetings, greetings, precious souls. Welcome. Welcome to Cosmic Truth Reverence, experiencing your infinite self. The Cosmic Truth Conference is gathering a unique panel of leading edge New Earth visionaries who will share heart opening and soul elevating wisdom to dive deep into our multidimensional realities, embracing our star origins and embodying our amazing divine humanness. We are invited together in reverence to the infinite truth of who we are and experience our sovereignty as galactic humans, elevating our planetary consciousness, together ushering in the new golden earth. Thank you for being here with us. I am Lise Ashaara, your host, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our guest, John Ryan. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Annelise. I'm delighted to be here. And a big hello to our audience as well.
Lovely, yes, thank you. So let me introduce you to everyone. John Ryan, MD, is a professor of medicine and a practitioner of energy and consciousness-based medicine. He is the author of Unity Field Healing Volume 1, Foundation of Energy Medicine and Quantum Healing, and the founder of Unity Field Healing, UFH, a new quantum process based on conscious activation of the DNA field to support healing and personal evolution. John channels the Syrian Blue-White Collective, who support unity field healing and humanity's ascension by DNA and enhancement. So you can find John on his website, unityfieldhealing.com. So, John, today we will converse around cosmic truth and reverence and how this can help us experience our infinite self. So, could you begin by telling us, in your experience, what is the essence of cosmic truth and how does it relate to our journey, our human journey, and our awakening?
Okay, well, great question. It's a big question. We're going to start with at the top.
Yeah,
So the to understand our cosmic essence, we have to take a step back a little bit, Annalise, and kind of look at the structure of the universe, if you would imagine. So we have to think from the perspective of the creator all the way down to manifest life or manifest reality. And to truly understand that in our the sense of our physical incarnation, we have to realize that there's a whole galaxy and universe that's part of this creation. And here on Earth, we are one part of that vast creation. And where our perspective and our focus is very limited in many ways, or it has been, I think, up until this point in time through this incarnational cycle, because we were kind of growing and evolving, coming to understand that, the Earth is part of a solar system, and the solar system is part of a galaxy, and the galaxy is part of a universe. And that our focus went from being very self-centered, just thinking that the only place where there's life in the galaxy is on Earth, and that humans are everything, and so on and so forth. We have to take a different approach to things now because of the expansion of consciousness that's taking place. And so we realize the Earth is a center for life. Humanity lives on the Earth, and that we've been evolving on the Earth. And our evolution can be understood from many different perspectives, from a very scientific perspective, but also perhaps from a much more spiritual or galactic perspective. And we're starting to understand that there's almost certainly, even from a scientific perspective, life on other planets. And so we're beginning to open our minds, if you will, or open our hearts as well, I guess, to the concept that there is life in other places in the universe, that it's not limited to the Earth. There are other stars that have planets that could potentially carry life. There are other, parts of the solar system that could have inhabited life forms just like we do here on the Earth. Now, our travel in space is still limited by physical constraint. We don't have the physics or the technology to travel super far through the galaxy, but when we look at probability and mathematical calculations and things like this, the likelihood that there's no life on other planets is almost is really zero. There has to be, in other words, even from a scientific perspective. Now, for people who've been more open-minded and spiritually inclined and, involved in some of the new age thinking, shall we say, the concept of civilizations other than the Earth civilization has become very forefront in modern days. And people have been channeling beings from these other star systems. People have been seeing UFOs. People have been having meditative visions of light beings and these kinds of things that identify themselves as being from other stellar civilizations. And through this there's a whole framework of galactic life that has unfolded for humanity to understand. And so some of the famous civilizations we hear about in that milieu are the Pleiadians, the Syrians, the Arcturians, the Lyrians, the Orions, these kinds of civilization. And so there's a whole stellar family that's come to be understood. Now, the challenge, of course, with this is all of this information comes from channeled sources, not from observable sources. So that introduces a lot of skepticism and doubt, and also room for misunderstanding, confusion, or even false information to kind of bleed into the picture. So we always have to be a little bit skeptical and take things with a grain of salt until we have a sense of personal confidence in what we're saying. For me personally, I started to have visitations from Syrian beings. They're blue beings. They're kind of angelic in their appearance when I see them in my mind's eye. And they presented themselves to me at a point in my own spiritual evolution, telling me that they were here to help us and to help me with the work I'm doing and to help humanity at large with this process of ascension that's taking place. And so in the unfolding of that, what they explained was there's a whole lineage of what we could call a family of light in the galaxy. And the Earth are kind of the most recent offspring in this family of light. And so the way the universe unfolds is there are civilizations that are developed and they carry what we would call a divine blueprint. They carry within them the quantum possibility to be communicating with the creator, if you will, or aware that they emerge or evolve from the creator. So we can be spiritually conscious beings. And so the way we might interpret that in a spiritual sense is aware of our divinity. We recognize that we are born of light, that we are born from a creator. The civilization evolves from that. It goes through a process of evolution that involves on the earth right now kind of this light dark struggle for humanity to learn how to unify and to operate as a collective race. And so other civilizations have gone through that before, and they've been our mentors and participating in the Earth's evolution. We're kind of like the next planet in that sequence. Mm-hmm. And the day will come when humanity evolves to such a point that we will live in what's termed an ascended consciousness, and will play a role in the development of future planets in the galaxy as well. So it's kind of like a big contextual structure just for understanding that, so that people have a grasp on how that all works. And then just bringing the focus back to the Earth at this point in time, the Earth is at a very monumental point in its history. And this gets termed the Ascension Process, or the time of ascension. And the essence of that is an understanding that the Earth is moving into a part of the galaxy where the energy and the light that is going to be woven into the fabric of the Earth, kind of delivered through the sun and to our solar system, and the Earth is going to be bathing in this light and energy, that it's going to catalyze a very rapid ascension of consciousness. And so humanity is going to be propelled into a sequence of ascension. And it's going to be a natural process, but it can be a very tumultuous process because we're moving from one kind of a civilization into another kind of a civilization, an awakened civilization, a civilization that lives in conscious awareness of its divinity and its unity. And so it's a big step to take for humanity from where we were living in duality consciousness, which was the last cycle of time. Now, the interesting thing that the Syrians have kind of revealed was this all unfolds in a galactic time scale. And there are civilizations on the earth that have known these kinds of things. For example, the Mayan timekeepers were very aware of this being an important time on the earth. In fact, it was interpreted in English thinking as the end of time, but it really didn't mean the end of time. It meant the end of a time cycle. And so what happens is the earth is moving through space and through the galaxy, and certain things are happening, all over the place. And we'll arrive at a point where the earth was about to go into a photon field where the energy that would be delivered to the earth was going to be really accelerated. And humanity was at a choice point, and we had to be evolved to a certain level of consciousness in order to be able to succeed in the forward momentum into an ascended civilization. And this gets termed the harmonic convergence. It dates back to August of 1987. And so at that point in time, the measurement was taken to see if humanity was evolved enough to be able to undergo a rapid ascension of consciousness. And the corollary to that is if we were not ready, then what would have happened is a decline, another decline of civilization. In other words, we would have been kind of eradicated from the surface and started again. Now, in order to appreciate what's being measured, in order to make this determination, if you will, we have to think about it not so much in scientific terms, but in spiritual terms. In other words, is there enough love on the planet? Does humanity already live in an ascended level of consciousness and a love-based consciousness enough to undergo and endure the process of this rapid civilization change? And so that was a measurement taken, and according to the Syrians and to other sources of channeled information, like Cryon, Lee Carroll and Cryon has spoken often about this. The measurement was that we passed the marker. In other words, there is enough love on the planet to undergo this rapid transformation. But all that really did at that point in time was put into place the start of this ascension process. And the first thing that had to take place was an adjustment in the electromagnetic grid of the earth, which took about a 25-year window of time. And so we can think of the electromagnetic grid kind of as the foundation. It's kind of like the magnet that holds everything in place. It's the structure of energy that is the foundational energy for the planet. And so that all had to be changed, upgraded, if you will. It had to go through like a system upgrade, just like we do on our computers, in order for the earth to be able to be ready to receive the energy that would start flowing in around the year 2012. And so since 2012, the earth has entered into this space of ascension, or rapid energetic acceleration, lifting of vibration, all these terms that people use to describe it. And so for the last 10 years, we've been propelling through this space. Now, when you think in galactic terms, 10 years is the twinkling of an eye, as they say. It's not really a big time frame when we're talking millions and billions of years. And so we're going to go through this process over the next 20, 40, 60, 80 years, where the earth will slowly be introduced into slowly in relative terms, introduced into an ascended frame of consciousness. And we're going to become very aware of our galactic brothers and sisters, other planets, these kinds of things that will all be part of this process. The earth will also start to understand its own innate divinity, the fact that every one of us is a conscious being of light that comes from a creator source, and that we are intimately connected to that, and that humanity is one. There's one humanity. And therefore, it doesn't matter our color or our personality attributes or all the things that we get all knotted over as human beings when we look at societal structure and constructs in history. We're going to understand that we are a collective humanity, and we're going to start operating and behaving like we are one as well. And so that's going to change very much the nature of human consciousness and the way that we relate to each other. Now, that seems magical thinking, I realize, when you kind of look at the earth and you say, really? Like, could that ever possibly be? But what's going to happen is, as we move into this energetic space, You can think of it like an ocean. We're swimming in it. And so as the energy of the earth is changing, as the energy that the earth is present in the atmosphere, if you will, or really in a more honest way, quantum dimensional space, dimensions of energy outside the physical view. As we're bathing in this energy, it's going to begin impacting us. And so the way we think will change, the way we relate will change. All these things that we consider human nature, if you will, are going to transform very naturally and very intuitively because we're going to be living in a different kind of an energetic reality. And it will be very easy to do in that space, even though it was very hard to do that in the space we're leaving or leaving behind, the duality experience, if you will. And what we need to understand is this transition from duality to unity is what civilizations go through when they are being developed. We planets are created in the space of free will, if you will. Every civilization gets to go through a process of understanding itself and the role of creation and how to create with light and dark forces and so on, and aligning ourselves with, with light or dark. And so that's a natural part of evolution. And it builds what we call a karma cycle. So we go through, a very elongated period of karma and being reborn, as souls back into the matrix, if you will, of humanity, and having the experience of different things, and from that learning, creating karma and healing karma, and so on and so forth. And so, but we get to a point where the role of karma in that sense becomes less useful. For example, if I were to say to you, is it a good idea to steal your neighbor's money? You know intuitively and innately that that's not a good thing to do. You don't need lessons around that. You're not going to do it. You're not going to try to do it. You're going to protect them if somebody else tried to do it. You would try to keep energy aligned and be honest. So the lesson, the value of that kind of a lesson is worn away. We don't need those lessons anymore. And so a very large swath of humanity has kind of evolved into a place where a lot of those lessons have been achieved and attained. And so we're ready to move into the next kind of creational space. And it's much more of a co-creatorship. It's an understanding our spiritual essence and working with that innate essence within us to create and to bring into form things of value and things of beauty and things of ascended thought and ascended civilization. And so you can kind of see the shift in consciousness that we're going to be asked to go through. And that's why you hear people use language like we're co-creators and so on. It's because we're learning to operate in that space of being tuned into our soul and our spirit and creating things from that space. And so, there'll be people who do that at the very beginning. There'll be people who do it in 10 years from now. There'll be people who do that in 20 years from now. There'll be a new cycle of children who are born on the planet, all wired up to the new. And of course, they'll do it much more spontaneously because they're not evolving into it. They're being born into it. And so it'll take some time, but not that long when we think about the big picture. And that's why, we say in the twinkling of an eye, all things shall change. But when you're talking in galactic terms, the twinkling of an eye might be a generation. And so just a big overview so people kind of understand the frame of reference. So I hope that answers the question okay.
It does, because actually reverence is part of those kind of deep spiritual feelings that participate in this expansion of consciousness. How can we cultivate even more reverence or all those positive or anyway expanding emotions?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. Yeah, no, it's a beautiful question because when we understand reverence, we realize when we live in the 3D reality, it's a very mental construct. There's a lot of forces of thought. We're always trying to do things based on thought rather than sometimes on deeper innate or spiritual motivations. And so we have our to-do lists, and we're dealing with people who say, when people are like this, you have to be like that, and so on and so forth. So we get all these rules and regulations of how to operate in the world, and it just keeps the world the same in essence. But when you start understanding there's something in you that's precious, it's a light. You were born as a thought of the creator. Like those are not light words, and they're poetic in a way, but they're also the simple truth. Each one of us only exists because we were formed in the mind of the creator. Otherwise, we would never have a soul. We would never exist in this reality. And so when we can really embrace that in our hearts and realize that's true of every member of the human race, no matter how nobly or terribly they're behaving or living in this reality. Every one of us was made by the same light. And that, I think when you just let that in your heart, first in your mind, but then in your heart, reverence is a natural thing to happen because you realize you're part of something magical, like it's majestic. And so when you are a thought in the mind of the creator, you're here on purpose on the earth, you're born by design, you have attributes and qualities that are meant to contribute to the whole. You're part of nature, you're part of the whole structure of humanity, you're part of a collective civilization, you're part of a galactic civilization. We become, first of all, humble, I think, by those kinds of thoughts. And the arrogance that is so innate in a duality human being just gets washed away because you realize I'm precious and important, but so is everybody, so is everything. And so my role on the earth is to be here in a place of honor, in a place of caretaking, in a place of contributing to the whole, in a place of helping others and not just self-serving in my own way of being, just trying to make all kinds of money and be really important and full of power and the kinds of things that we get caught up in the duality kind of life. And we realize that humanity has an opportunity to be in service. And so we can actually play a role in making the world a better place. We can help other people live better lives. We can, move into that frame of thinking, which is the kind of thinking we live in when we're building an ascended humanity. And so when we do that, then a reverence, I think, is a natural byproduct of that. It almost becomes a way of life. You look at everything in creation and you realize it has been made for the earth. Every plant, every tree, every blade of grass, every ocean, every mountain, like everything contains sacred energy. And you see life unfold. It moves through cycles of birth and rise, and then, aging, and then decay, and everything comes and goes in this beautiful cycle of time. And everything operates within that framework. So the opportunity to be here is precious. It's limited in time, and we're not here forever. We're here for a window of time, and it has a purpose and a magic to it that we're born into. And so when we start thinking in that frame, which happens very spontaneously in this new energy, it's kind of the essence of that energy. I think reverence becomes just an innate part of us. But we can practice it. We can kind of look at the world through those eyes. And, you look at a flower that's in bloom, about to bud, and you just think of, how did that even come to be? Like, how did that take form out of nothingness? Well, how did that, get to have a little life, even for a short frame of time? And so the wonder, the eyes of a child, the wonderment of life and creation can really take hold. And I think when we're in that space, we can't but be reverent because we realize that that's the nature of things. Then we can develop spiritual practices that understand that as well and bring our reverence into those things, when we meditate, when we pray, and however we feel aligned with doing that, when we spend time in nature, all the things that people like to do, when we take care of ourselves, when we nourish our body with food, we can do everything in a way of reverence and honor. And so it becomes a way of life, really. It's not like just an activity. We start by making it an activity or, a, a formed frame of thinking, I guess. But I think over time it becomes much more spontaneous to learn to live in that space.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely. And so your work is connected with DNA. I mean, your unity field healing is both healing and DNA. I mean, that's the way I just did from the back. But actually, how does it relate to how does healing help us uh, even accelerate our expansion and our ascension?
Okay. So in my work, the way the Syrians brought this information to me, so a couple of things around that. So when this information first came to me, it came at least in the form of visions. So I was shown pictures, I was shown images that had content that I kind of had to decipher. Like I was shown, like when if you've done shamanic journeying or even dreams, sometimes you're shown pictures, and there's so much information coded into the picture that you can't interpret it all at once. But as you sit with the image in later, like if you record the image or make little notes in a journal about the experience, the image keeps talking to you. It's like there's so much information coded into it that it continues to reveal itself. It's an interesting way to say it. And so what happened for me was I was shown a whole series of images that had pictures of DNA. They had pictures of what a soul goes through when they're about to reincarnate on the earth. How we bring down the information from our bigger soul to a very limited perspective so that we can focus on just that information for a lifetime that we're going to be born into. These kinds of things were all contained in a series of images that I lived. And one of the things I was shown was this big DNA molecule. Now, at first, I didn't quite know how to interpret that. I mean, I have a background, of course, in science and medicine and stuff, so I'm very familiar with genetics and chromosomes and all those kinds of things. But this was like a big light structured thing. It was quantum really, and I didn't really know what it was at first. And so I was calling it the spiritual DNA, or, these kinds of things, because what I was shown is that this DNA molecule it's many things, but one thing it is like a library. Every lifetime a person has lived is coded like an Akashic history within this 24th chromosome. Eventually, I was shown that this is the connection that we have in our body to our higher self essence. In other words, when the soul is formed or made, it's this structure that contains the record, the potential, the energy, the information, everything about every incarnation that that soul will ever live. When we're born, we only have access to a little bit of that information. It's like we filter down in order to be focused on an incarnation. But when that filter is removed, or if, for example, if we pass over and go back into spirit, we go back into the space where we have access to all that other information again. And so it's a system that works in order to give us the opportunity to not be aware of everything all at once so that we can focus on a more minuscule aspect of a creational experience. So it makes sense if we think about it. And so what I was shown is as we go historically, when we would be born, there would be like a little filament or a string that would extend in a quantum space, like not in a 3D way where we're connected to like a physical string. It was like an energetic cord that would stay connected to us while we're incarnate in a body. And this was how we go back and forth to spirit. But it would be really wound down. It would be so tight that when we're born, we forget we come from spirit. It's like we're born and we have consciousness, but we don't know where we came from or why we're here, or all the things we go through as human beings. As we go through the ascension process, this band, this string is opening. So what I was shown was a vision where there was like a string which turned into a helix, a double string, and it kept pulsing open bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it eventually contained all kinds of light and information. So in the vision, I was being made aware that there's a change taking place in this connection. And so what it opens into is this 24th chromosome. And so what I was told is that as the ascension process continues, we're going to have much more access to the information and the content in that 24th chromosome. And so, one way of saying that is we're going to become aware of our multidimensionality. And so, humans, for example, already today, if you ask people, do you believe in reincarnation? Are you aware of other lifetimes that you have lived? You know, when I ask those kinds of questions in a seminar room, more than 50% of people raise their hands. And I always tease people. I say, can you imagine if I asked that question in 1952? What would happen? Like I would have been like taken away put into a psychiatric hospital or something like that. And so, but in modern day, many people are beginning to have these kinds of experiences. And so, if you can remember another lifetime when you're present in this body in this lifetime, just that is a multidimensional experience. That simple fact is a multidimensional experience. So it helps us begin to understand, oh, okay, that's what we mean when we say multidimensionality. But what's happening as this information opens to us, it's almost like it's there. It's not always foremost in our minds, but it's around us, Annalise. It's like it has an influence on us. And so as this starts to open, what people go through is a spiritual change. And the way we experience that as humans is we're living our life, born into the life that we were destined to have, you know, through that incarnational moment. Along comes the ascension, things start changing, the DNA starts opening. People start saying, I don't like my life anymore. I'm not interested in this work anymore. My friendships, they're not fulfilling now like they were. And I love all the people around me, but they're not nourishing me the way I need to be nourished. And we start seeking change. You know, we start changing our jobs, we start changing our relationships, we might change our partners, we might change anything because we're trying to evolve through the energetic impulse that's happening as this starts opening, because we're being slowly guided into a new version of ourselves. We're being birthed into a new kind of life in this incarnation that's more attuned to that expanded spiritual energetic opening. And so people become interested in eating well, people become interested in yoga, people become interested in spiritual information, people may open to channel, they have memories of past lifetime, all the things that are part of what we're experiencing now in the spiritual community. And so all of that is a result of this 24th chromosome expansion. That's exactly why that's happening. Now, what was shown to me as this opening is taking place is we're also being given tools to help us in that transition. And so unity field healing would fall into that category. There, in other words, as the chromosome is opening, humans are going through all kinds of crazy experiences. And so we're being given tools, we're being given information, we're giving things to facilitate and make it easier, make it quicker, make it cleaner and smoother, and understand what's happening at the same time. And so the work of unity field healing works with a light template. It's a pattern of light that I was shown, like a sacred geometry. And it works inside the 24th chromosome to recalibrate the space so that it opens the channels, if you will, to let information come in or to let healing come in. In our human body, we have access to incredible healing from this realm, from this 24th chromosomal realm, because we have, for example, if we're living with certain conditions in our body, sometimes they originate by energetic blockages that exist. So if we can clear open those energetic blockages, healing takes place. Sometimes the information we need in order to achieve a healing is contained in the genetics of another lifetime. And so we can kind of go read that record and then bring that into this body and create healing in this space. So there's lots of potentials that open up when we start understanding the nature of this existence and the nature of this communication. And so that's where unity field healing falls in. I sometimes say healing is a misnomer because healing is really a byproduct of spiritual integration. Like the more we do that realignment, the more healing takes place spontaneously. And so it's as much a calibration tool or a tool for personal growth and evolution as it is any kind of healing. And sometimes healing is part of our journey, and experiencing certain kinds of illnesses and different things are part of our journey, but they're meant to bring us back to harmony and an understanding. And that's really where the value of this kind of tool comes to place. So that's kind of how that fits into the picture. It's part of the ascension process. It's part of the triggered awakening that's taking place. And it's a tool that works in that realm for people to be able to support themselves through that process. Eventually, as the work kind of unfolded, I was introduced to the idea of creating a practice, like a more formalized healing modality, if you will. And so they showed me how to format it into sessions and then actually teach other people how to do the work as well. So now there's like well over 500 practitioners all around the world who are doing unity healing work as well. And so these are gifts of grace. That's how I see them. They're gifts that are being given to help us journey through this transformation, because we're all aware it's not easy. We look at the world today, we kind of see the impact of what's happening. You might even question whether something good is happening if you look at the planet. You think there's so much craziness and chaos and political unrest and duality and polarity, and all these things are bubbling up to the extremes. But really what's happening is the light is pushing all of that up like froth on the surface. It's bubbling it all up so that we can finally integrate some of those experiences and heal them, heal the things that need to be healed, fix the things that need to be fixed to propel us forward. And to go through that, to live through that is not easy. And spirit recognizes that. So, that's why there's so much assistance available to us from this quantum realm in the form of the light families or angelic forces of healing and you name it. So it's all there to help us and support us through the transition.
Yes, I love you mentioned the recalibration, you mentioned sacred geometry, and you mentioned our DNA and our cosmic nature. So how does it all intertwine? I mean, I know we have only a few minutes, but about about the tetrahedron. I mean, all this sacred geometry. Yourself, you were shown visions, so it's not mental, obviously. I mean, it's not words. So how does it all
fit together,
seep into us to make us expand?
yeah, exactly. So I love the question. So we have to understand we exist in a three-dimensional reality. We have our physical body. There's kind of the three directions. We could add time and say there's four dimensions. But when we start exploring quantum physics and these kinds of things that are happening now on the planet, the way science is evolving on the planet, we realize there are dimensions that are invisible to our senses. In other words, there are sounds outside our range of hearing. There's light outside our range of visual perception. And so there are many dimensions that exist that we're not aware of in a conscious sensory way, but they're there. It's like you don't see UV light, but if you sit in the sun with, just expose yourself all day long, you're going to get a sunburn, even though you don't see the UV light. And so there's all kinds of energy that is around us that we know it's there, but we don't see it or feel it or hear it. Most people don't anyway. And so you just know it's there, and that's as much as we can do. But it's there is the important part. So there's this dimensional energy and this dimensional light that exists around us. What you start to understand from a creational sense is that in order for things to exist in form, there's a lot of things happening in those other layers of energy. And so things only exist in form. It's kind of the end of the production line, like they exist in form at the end of the creational stream. And inside, there are blueprints of energy. And so, for example, in our body, our physical body, there's something that's termed the etheric body. Most people don't see it. You can see it pretty easily if you kind of in a dark space and you put your hand up against a black wall and you can see like a radiation of light around your fingertips. Or now people have cameras, where they take aura pictures and things. And so we're beginning to cognize or even see this kind of energy. But that etheric body is a blueprint. It's kind of like a template of living energy on which the physical substance organizes itself to form a physical body. So it's kind of like a blueprint. It's a living energetic blueprint. It's a good way of understanding energy because we start to realize everything in form has blueprints. It has these energetic blueprints. And that's where sacred geometry really comes into the picture. Now, from what I was shown at the at the when we're shown these visions that are quantum, we have to be careful not to over interpret them in a linear way. So I preface what I'm about to say by that because I know what I'm about to say is not exactly the way it is, but it's the way it was shown to me so that I could understand. And what I was shown is at one end of this 24th chromosome, we can visualize a structure that we would call the Sriyank. It's, very famous in Hindu spirituality. In fact, it's declared that when the sound Om is made, Om, the geometry that forms from that sound is the Sri Yantra. And the Sri Yantra is also considered to be the divine template of the divine feminine, Shakti. And so the pattern kind of exists at one end of the DNA, and then there's the structure of DNA. And here we are down on the other end, living a life in form. So I'm making it linear, but it's not really a linear reality. But that's kind of how the vision was shown to me, so I could understand what's being shown. The Sri Yantra is considered to be the geometry that holds the potential for all other geometries to exist. So, in other words, every other kind of geometrical structure that we could think of, a double tetrahedron, even the flower of life in all the form of circles, all the different kinds of platonic solids, and so on, all the little patterns, the phi ratio that creates the repeating sequences of structure. So we see all the petals on a flower and these kinds of things. All of this flows from this primary geometry. And sacred geometry is really the language of God. It's really how things are spoken into form. It's the blueprint that exists in the energy spaces for form to then develop around the energy. So just as we have a etheric body in our body, you have one, I have one, everybody listening has one inside their body that exists as part of the energetic structure or matrix that allows us to exist in form. If that were pulled out of our physical body, there'd be no organization. The body would decay. And that's what happens when we pass on. Our whole soul is pulled out, all the energy bodies are pulled out, and then the form disintegrates back into the earth. And so if that energy is not there, then form doesn't exist. And that's why it's said in spirit, like in ancient spiritual teachings, the sound Om continues. The moment it would be withdrawn, all the universe would cease to exist. And so it helps us understand or appreciate the meaning of that kind of an expression or those words, if you will. And so from that sound is the primordial pattern that can create all the other geometries. And so sacred geometry is so much more than just mathematics or geometrical science. It's actually the living interface. It's the energy that exists behind the form of creation, holding it in place for its duration and its time to be. There are many, 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 many different forms of sacred geometry. They kind of reflect all the different aspects and ways that form can take shape and creation can exist. So when you look around your room and you see physical things and living things and plants and flowers and everything that exists, you appreciate there's an energy behind it, underlying it. And so the library of sacred geometry and its relationship through what's called the golden mean ratio is what allows certain probabilities and possibilities to exist, holding form of all different kinds in place. So when energy is changing, if we're going to bring healing or transformation or those kinds of things into a physical reality, it only begins to make sense that, of course, there have to first be energetic changes that take place. In other words, if we can fix things at the energy level or recalibrate things at the energy level, the form that's built on top of it will reflect that transformation. And that's the essence of energy medicine, isn't it? All healing. Like we're trying to help unblock emotions or release patterns of energy so that a different form can express, a different life can express. And so we really begin to appreciate the nuance of it. And so if we're going through this ascension, of course, there's going to be a whole geometrical reconfiguration of everything, grids on the planet, templates of energy, all these kinds of things. It's all going to be part of the change that then manifests in a physical way and in a dynamic living way. And so that's kind of how the sacred geometry part of things fit into place. Now, the unity field healing specifically, I was shown one template. It was a pattern of living light that works in the DNA molecule, whose purpose is to create recalibration at that level. So it's kind of one form of sacred geometry, but that's how it fits into the bigger picture. So I hope that is a good answer.
Thank you. Yes, it's we see that we've been given. I mean, the knowledge, the wisdom has been always present with the ancient teachings that you describe and that you unpack. So thank you for bringing that now. And maybe to conclude, we can speak about the Syrian Blue-White Collective that you are channeling. And I would be interested to know what is their perspective um, of the collective ascension, human ascension at this stage. What is their perspective on it, and maybe what is their most important message to conclude?
Sure. So the Syrian beings, they, like I said earlier, they came to me in a vision. The way they presented themselves to me, Annalise, was I was meditating. I was in a workshop, and I saw this blue light develop in my third eye. It kind of got big, and it was like a sun that was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But it was an energy that was really electric, white and blue, and it had a little bit of gold and silver kind of mixed into it, but it was mostly a blue-white kind of an appearance. And what happened was it fanned out into an array. And then out of that stepped these light beings. So it was kind of like a big production. They kind of stepped out, and I could see their energy body. Now, they didn't have physical faces. They were really still humanoid in terms of their body. They had a head and a torso and a body, but it was all just this glowing energy. There really weren't like physical features of a nose and eyes and mouth and stuff like that. But they present it this way to me because they were trying, the purpose, I guess, that I understand is they show that they operate as a collective, but they can also be individuated. And so we can think of it as humans. Imagine if we're part of an organization and we're all different people, but we come together with a common goal. And energetically, we're like one, even though we're different beings. It explains unity, doesn't it? It kind of helps us understand living in a unity state. And so they presented themselves that way, showing me that they really, on an energetic level, are one, but they can also individuate and be present in an individuated way. And what they told me was the Syrian civilization has been a fundamental part of the Earth's evolution. The way they say it is before the beginning of the Earth. So they're so intimately connected to our experience that they've been part of it even before the Earth kind of existed or housed humanity or became a home for humanity. And so they were part of the development, the energetic development of the earth, preparing the fields, the grids, all these kinds of things. And they've been there in the background, and they've come forward in more conscious ways at certain periods of human evolution. And so to be aware of that, for example, if we go back to ancient Egypt, which is kind of the oldest, you know, well-documented civilization that we have on the planet, they had a very deep connection to Sirius. So there were beings who were part of their pantheon who really they explain are Syrian beings who came and were present there as part of the civilization up to the time. And so the Syrians kind of confirmed that. They said they've been here in form and in consciousness. So there are times when they have incarnated in form bodies, but there are also times when they've just been overlighting and channeling energy and messages to human beings. And so they said this is such a time. So their intent is not to be manifest or come back in a physical way, but to support humanity, because we are developing the skills and the abilities to communicate telepathically and so on. And so they channel messages instead. And so they're part of the evolution. And they said the reason they came forward specifically to me as part of this process was because of the work of unity field healing, because they're in the background, kind of supporting that work, helping us with the template and the healing sessions and all the things we do. In fact, they're part of the initiations that the practitioners receive. They come into these initiations and create energetic changes to help the person be able to carry the energy to do the work, if you will. And so they're part of that. But they also said there's a large number of human beings who are really at an advanced level of their integration. And it would be very helpful to have tailored support for these people in order to move through this journey and to really step into their power in the new energy as new humans, if you will. And so they wanted to create a series of monthly transmissions where they do meditations that are guided. And they come into these meditations. It's almost like they come in to everybody in the meditation. They're reading the energy of the person in the meditation, and then they're supporting energetically the transformation that will help that person at this moment in time. So they're kind of like tailored to the moment for the energy state of that person. Now, the transmissions always have a theme. And so what they've shown is there's kind of two things happening simultaneously. This 24th chromosome is opening, and, the things that we've already kind of narrated a little bit. But secondarily, the human energy form is also changing. We're taking on a new energetic architecture. So we still have our chakras and, the etheric body and all these things, but everything is being enhanced. There's new levels or types of energy, a crystalline energy that's being added to the human energy system to support it to carry this new energy that we're opening up through the 24th chromosome, but also to live on the earth as the crystalline fields of the earth are expanding and the earth is undergoing her own metamorphosis. Mm-hmm. And so our energy body is changing. They term it in the work that I do with them, the Diamondlike Body. That's the term that's given to it. And so there's the 24th chromosome and the Diamondlike Body simultaneously enhancing or upgrading. And so their work in these transmissions is often about that. There's a whole series of transmissions that talk about the galactic support that's available in doing this. And some of the transmissions are more directly helping us make the attunements in our energy system to support the change. And so that's what the transmissions have been about. We're in our 6th year. I can't believe it, but it's the 6th year now of these monthly transmissions. And when I did the work, I had a discussion with them. Like, the people register, it's, you pay to kind of be part of the transmission series. But I wanted to make all the meditations freely available so that there's no restriction. If somebody didn't have the resources, they don't attend the whole teaching and all that kind of stuff, but everybody can do the transmissions, and they're all on my website. So there's a page under the Syrian tab on the Unity Field Healing website where all 60 plus meditations are there. And so people can tune in and do them. And people can also purchase the replays for the whole series if they're interested in that as well. But they're all there, and they're beautifully supportive. Like, the messages that come back to me about the things that people have worked through or healed or integrated, or the transformations they've experienced, it's really humbling to hear from people about the magic of what's available in this kind of work. And they've explained too that if people are listening to the meditations, even if it's 3 years after the meditation, time is not the restriction. The moment you step into the energy of the meditation, you're stepping into the energy of the experience. And so if you listen to it 3 years later, it's as powerful and as healing and evocative as the day it was done with the group being present. So there's a quantum field that's part of each transmission that people kind of step into to do it. So I share that because it's there for people, and they may not know when they're interested in it, then they can tune in.
Well, beautiful. Thank you for sharing all this, John. Thank you for this beautiful and reverent. I was looking for the word anyway for this conversation. Thank you. And you are offering actually a free gift. Well, you mentioned those transmissions and everything that people can access, but you are also offering a special free gift for the audience. You are offering to win the audio session number 3 of your program. Can you explain for 3 people? So can you explain in a few words what it
For
is?
sure, yeah. So the unity field healing sessions, they can be done in 2 ways. There's an audio program where you listen to the meditation, and then you can work with a practitioner who delivers the attunements as a practitioner, like an energy session, if you will. And so when I'm speaking in events and things, I'll often offer a contest, I guess, if you will, where people just enter the contest if they're interested, and 3 people will be selected randomly, spiritually, to receive the audio sessions. And so they'll be sent the package of the 3 audio sessions to work with the whole unity field healing program. And so if people click on the link, they can enter, and then the people will be chosen. I'll give it about 2 weeks so people have time to listen to the audio, and then I'll select 3 people later in April, send out the package.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And you mentioned your website. You mentioned the transmissions. Is there any other event or program you want to speak about, which could be coming up?
Sure. So through the rest of the year, we just had a beautiful practitioner training in Sedona, Arizona. It was so powerful doing it there in the energy of the land and the place. That was magical. I have a couple of more practitioner trainings coming up through 2024 and 2025. Um, the Some of them are done online, so it's just to facilitate it and make it easier and less expensive too. Like if people don't want to spend money to have to travel or things like that, you can do the whole training program online. And so we have a couple of online trainings. And so if people go to the Unity Field website, unityfieldhealing.com, there's at the top where all the tabs are, there's events. So every event, every kind of training or practitioner training will be listed there. And people can also, if they want to register for transmissions, can also do it through the events page. And so all the information will be there for that. The transmissions take place monthly, and people can join in. You don't have to have done all the other transmissions to begin. You can start where we are and then go back and listen to some of the other transmissions, in the sequence that you feel intuitively is right for you to listen to any or all of them. And so, but people can join in at any point along the way. The Syrians have said that they're aware of that and that they support people because it's such a tailored energetic process. They can kind of read the energy of where a person is and help them at that moment in time. So there's no limitations. It's not like you have to do a prerequisite of other transmissions to participate.
Well, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you again, John, and thank you to the Syrian Collective for being here with us and for all this wisdom. Thank you for all the work you are doing on this process, and thank you to the Syrians and our galactic families. And I want to thank also the audience, of course, for being here with us, and I'm sure they received so much from this conversation. So thank you and namaste.
Namaste. Thank you, Annelise, and thank you again to the audience too. And, thank you so much for the beautiful work you're doing. It's every little bit of light is what adds to make the collective whole. So we're all working together as one big family, and I just want to honor you.
Thank you.